And
all right,
that's okay. We'll do the call to order at 5:30, and I'm pretty sure Nate and Luke will get on as the Burrito Brothers any minute now. So introductions and virtual meeting rules. I don't think there's anybody here new. Well, I can't see everybody that's on. Oh, there they are. Okay, so yeah, we do have a quorum. And so Chris, do you want to do virtual meeting rules?
I don't know if we need to belabor at this time. Sharice has heard all that before. Everybody else is on the commission, so I think everyone's good to go.
Yeah, okay. So approval of the minutes, follow this link to the recorded minutes. And there's that. And we approve it because it's there. Although I'll be talking about that going forward. Anyways, public forum. Do you have anything you want to add, Sharice?
Nope.
Okay. Then adjustments to the agenda. I have quite a bit. That was good that Chris got the agenda out in time so that we could have a meeting. I've learned that the agenda has to be out 48 hours before the meeting in order for it to be a meeting where we can make any decisions. So he had to go ahead and get that out. He didn't have any input from me, but I understand. And so I do have some adjustments, and I'm going to bring that forward here in just a minute. Okay. So I want to put note-taking first because I'd like to have notes on this this meeting, and that shouldn't take very long. I put 10 minutes. Hopefully we can get done in 5. And I want to review the roles and responsibility of the Forest Lands Commission. Our little snafu with the agenda and about note-taking, and it's a new year, and a good, those are all good reasons to review our roles and responsibility at the Forest Lands Commission. And I think it will also help us make decisions about going forward if we have those fresh in mind. Frank is going to lead a discussion about the commissioner time commitments that we're willing to make in this process, in particular with the Forest Plan Amendment, but also with Forest Lands Commission business anyways. He thinks he can do that in about 15 minutes. And then we have the last presentation of the veg chapter. I didn't know whether Nate had that or not.
Yeah, no, thanks, Sil. Yeah, I just met a good meeting with Marty last evening. And so I don't want to do that until I can get you guys all the info ahead of time so you can have it in front of you. I don't like presenting material where we're all trying to read off the screen. And I'm still trying to organize exactly where I want to go with it. So I could do a quick discussion, 5 to 10 minutes, or I could talk for about 5 minutes of sort of where I see the direction of that chapter, or we could skip it or have a discussion on things that you brought up last meeting as well, unless that's in a different spot of the agenda. But I don't need more than, unless Marty pops in and wants to talk about it too, but I don't see more than 5 to 10 minutes.
Okay, well, we'll put that placeholder there, and then at the end, well, then I also want to bring closure to the chapters that Frank and John worked on, and that Leslie and I worked on. I believe that neither of us have received any comments, so our wrap up will be pretty quick. So there's that. And then after that, we want to talk about what to do with what's been done so far and where to go from here. If we get done early, I think that won't hurt anybody's feelings. But I think with, you know, we have plenty to talk about to fill our time too. We usually do. So those are the adjustments that I have to the agenda. In addition, then Chris has put down Leslie and Luke to talk about the Trails Master Plan. I don't know if there's anything new there. I hadn't heard of any recent meetings, but we can take some time there if Leslie and Luke do. I can say I don't have anything to add about the Intercommission Climate Group. And then the rest is that Chris had on here is what I just talked about just now. So let's start with note taking so that we can get a note taker going. What I found out during this last month is that we really should have something other than the recording for notes. I think that when I talked to Melissa Hudala, she was surprised that we didn't have notes besides the recordings. That should be reason enough for us to have notes. But I think, you know, a far more important use of the notes is to capture what comments have been made and input to the various drafts that have been proposed, projects that are being proposed, all of our ideas, because it's pretty hard to absorb what everybody's comments are, especially in this Zoom atmosphere. And then to track that and to go back and listen to the recordings is pretty tedious. I know I'm not willing to do it. So Frank and I talked about note taking, and he said he's willing to go first and take notes for tonight. And then we could go by alphabetical order for who's next, and we can put that in the agenda so you know when your time is up. I think the notes don't have to be exhaustive. They need to capture the things that are talked about, and they need to capture when a decision's been made. And so I think that would prompt us to more consciously make decisions and vote, and that's a good way then for the note taker to know what to capture. Frank, do you have anything you want to add on that? We talked about a timeline, so.
Yeah, as far as the notes go, they're going to be rough and they're going to go out right after the meeting. And you got a week to look at them and tell me where I messed up, but they're not formal until we adopt them at the following monthly meeting. So that's what I'm thinking about right now. Yeah,
so we'd like for people to pay attention to that, unless you know, we all trust Frank, and if we don't have any changes to those notes that he makes, or if you've listened to the recording and thinks he messed up, let him know, but it would be good to have that within a week. I think that also helps for the person that's trying to work on any projects in between our meetings, and incorporate those comments rather than having to wait until, you know, the next meeting to incorporate those comments or to be reminded of what those comments were. So we want the comments to go out as soon as possible after the meeting, and a week then to make any corrections. So how do people feel about that? Anybody have a problem with that, or feel that we shouldn't be doing it this way?
Yeah, I'll just hop in. I think that it would be pretty difficult to both be a good note taker and to participate as a commissioner. I know in the past that this role was filled by, I believe, Chris's assistant or another staff member, which makes it kind of, helpful for commissioners to be able to have those notes taken, but maybe not necessarily be the note taker themselves. Chris, do you know anything about that? Are there plans to refill any of those jobs?
Yeah, we just don't have the staffing anymore to do that and to pay people overtime to be nighttime meetings. I'm salaried, so more hours is less pay, but for people who are hourly who we would have doing it, there's no budget to have people staff the meeting to take notes. And I'm happy to take my turn in amongst everybody, but it does get onerous trying to be a participant and take notes at the same time, because you are having a hard time listening to people. If you're saying something, then you're not taking your own notes and you're recreating your own testimony later, which is kind of awkward. So I don't know, maybe Steph can weigh in if she's part of other commissions of what they're doing.
Certainly. What you're really talking about minutes, right? Not notes.
Yeah, we've used the notes to create the minutes.
Well, it would really be somebody taking minutes. And that would basically be, as you said, outcomes and votes and the decisions of votes. And you don't generally, how that then happens is at the next meeting, people can amend the notes or the minutes. But it isn't a discussion item prior to that. So I would just try to do what other commissions are doing right now. They're doing some of what you're doing, is trying to figure out who creates the agenda and what happens with minutes now that we have less staff than we used to. That's what I would suggest. I think you're going to have to just have one person take the minutes, and then at the next meeting approve them or change anything that the commission feels was left out. And they can be fairly brief. I mean, they can be more about, as I said, what you vote on and your outcomes. And
that is true. So we do not need to capture everything that everybody said.
That stopped.
We don't need to do that. And no. We have a lot of discussion, so it can simply be that, you're saying we talked about such and such. There were a lot of comments. I think that we have been very lax about not making conscious decisions. But if we're making more conscious decisions, all that needs to be captured is what was decided. And that meets our obligation and responsibility for city records. And I think that will prompt us to be more intentional with the work we're doing. And I hope that in itself will improve the work we're doing. So I'd like to move on. There's no other way. It has to be one of us.
I have my hand up. Just to follow up. So I know that Frank's going to talk about like workload commitments later, but so in the not too distant past, the city provided a service, which was not only taking the notes, but also typing them up later if someone's taking them by hand. And that is no longer being provided. Is this permanent or temporary? Are we going to never have a city provided note taker ever again? Or is that an unfilled job that's going to get hopefully filled someday, and that would then go back to the city employee?
I can't answer that question. I can only say that for me, for the foreseeable future, I think we need notes. and the city thinks we need notes. So using the resources we have in front of us, which is all of us, and if there's somebody that simply just doesn't want to do it, then don't do it, and the rest of us will.
An alternate strategy, as the only other commission I'm really familiar with is the Wildfire Safety Commission, is they just meet during business hours so that we have somebody that we don't have to pay overtime to come and do notes, which that's kind of the big sticking point, is we just don't have an overtime budget anymore. So if we wanted to move our meeting from 3 to 5 instead of 5:30 to 7:30, we could probably capture somebody who's here and wouldn't have to come back on time and a half to take notes, which is, you know, yeah, it's once a month, but it's just a budget item that we really don't have anymore.
Question?
Okay, so we've had this discussion about changing our hours many times before. This is an extra thing that wasn't on the agenda today, and I would like to move on. So for tonight, Frank's going to take notes, and the next person up would be Luke. Unless he wants to do it, and then we'll just go in alphabetical order until somebody gets on the agenda to talk about different hours and different times. So moving forward.
Still, there were other people wanting to comment, but.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. So yeah, let me know, pipe up, because I can't see everybody all at the same time. So whoever's got their hand up, go.
I think John Owen, didn't you?
Well, I was just figuring, so in terms of minutes here, I guess we're not making a decision until next time on if they're going to be internally generated by each of us in turn, or if we're going to move to a different time where we can capture services that will be paid in normal staff time. And I guess we're kind of making a decision on what goes in the minutes, because some of us are not familiar with that. But I guess what I heard is we're going to really essentially record our votes on decisions we make and the outcomes we anticipate. Is that
okay? How about I put my money where my mouth is and say, let's vote on that. I'll make a motion that we take notes on a rotational basis in alphabetical order. And the notes are to include decision points and topics of discussion and any pertinent comments that are made. The notes will be sent out to the group within a week of them being made, and so that they can be utilized by the people who are working on any particular project, and they will be made official at the following meeting where we accept the minutes. That's my motion.
So would the other motion be that we move the time to 3 to 5 on?
No, that's my motion. We have to vote on it. And if you want to, if it doesn't succeed, then you could suggest another motion.
I'll second it just so we can get it to final discussion and a vote.
So there's a final discussion. Thank you, John.
This is Leslie. Frank, do you just want to alternate between the two of us and go back and forth and be done with it? I'm perfectly willing to do it. It's no problem. Every committee that I've been in, it's been a city employee or the city representative that's there, but it sounds like that's not an option. And so I'm fine with doing it. I don't think this needs to be discussed anymore. I'll do it every single time if we need to. I don't care.
I'm happy to do it occasionally as well too, and I've done it a lot with other commissions, so I've got experience doing it.
I'm glad to do it too as part of the rotation.
I took meetings for a technical team for like 20 years. So while the meeting was going on and while I was running it. So
Frank, I'm totally sold. You can do it.
I don't want to do it all. I want everybody to have be able to participate.
Yeah.
But if we only have 4, that's what we'll use. But everybody else owes us a cookie.
So are we going to vote now?
If there's no more discussion.
Do we need to vote if we have volunteers and everyone's fine with that?
Yeah, we should vote and have it for the record so that Frank can capture it in the notes.
Okay.
So there's no more discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Hey, wait, just sorry. I'm trying to unmute and get my hand up. If we're approving, your motion was that we're on a rotational basis, rotational alphabetical basis. So if we approve that, then we're going with that, even though we're just discussing that we have a few people that are willing to just sort of take the onus.
Well, the volunteers maybe can just take over and, if they're available, and otherwise it would go to the person. I guess it seems a little confusing to me.
Okay, my motion was that it's on the rotational basis, and now I can withdraw that motion. No pun intended.
You could also just make a friendly amendment.
No. Okay, the friendly amendment is a rotational basis. And if you can't do it or don't want to do it, go next in line till we find somebody that does.
I second.
You'd second that, Nate?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Luke will. Yeah, okay, that's fine. That's clear enough. I just was trying to clarify what we were approving.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, sure. With that amendment, then Luke seconds, and I think discussion's already been had. So do your vote thing, and I'm ready.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? No. Okay, thanks a lot. So that will get easier now. So I wanted to go over our roles and responsibilities. It's not that nobody knows, but I think we haven't been acting with intention. So I wanted to go back to the charter that's on our website. And our charter is to develop a forest management, or one of our pieces of it is to develop forest management plans for the city of Ashland's municipal forests. And that is the commission developing that. So I want everybody to keep that in mind. It doesn't say when or how often. It just says that we develop them. And we did develop the previous 2 forest plans in 1992 and 2016. So that's, I think, pertinent to what we're talking about now. It says that we are also to provide direction and oversight to planning teams concerning wildland-urban interface and the Ashland Creek watershed. So, so we're to provide direction and oversight to the people that are working on these plans. So I think that's important, that it's our direction and our oversight. We're to submit our recommendations coming from the commission to the city council regarding forest management practices. So again, that's coming from us. And we're to ensure that plans integrate diverse opinions of citizens and private landowners. Yeah, I know it's hard during COVID, but you know, and in the past we've had field trips, but I think we've sort of let that responsibility to go out and seek those recommendations from our neighbors and the general citizenry to bring back to the commission. And we've just been carrying on with our own agendas rather than that we're speaking for, you know, our constituents, so to speak. So I think that's important. And we are to promote public knowledge and acceptance of the Ashland Forest Plan programs. So once we do a plan and we approve it, then it's our job to help the public know about it and help them accept it. So I thought that was very important to know. I also have been talking a little bit to Steph and to the city recorder, Melissa Hudala, who is very involved in the commissions. I have not yet talked to the city manager, but I do know that the city is taking a hard look at all the commissions and seeing where they overlap. And because I called her to ask, well, where's the original, you know, establishment of the Forest Lands Commission? And she laughed and she said, well, you'd have to go back to the meeting minutes where it got established. So in the case of our commission, that's going back, so we don't know which month it was, which meetings, you know, what record of that there is. And she laughed that, you know, when the city is feeling a problem or feeling that some outside input is needed rather than just city staff working on it, they established a commission. And she also told me that Ashland has more commissions than the city of Portland. And she joked that that the city kind of, if a leaf falls, another commission is established. But so the city is taking a hard look at these commissions and recognizing the time that it takes for the staff to attend these and the note taking and all that that involves. And so I thought that was good to know. Steph alluded to that a little bit before, and you know, as for now, we're going forward as a Forest Lands Commission with our existing charter, and until we're told different, we'll go ahead that way. I was also illuminated a little bit about the role of the chair and the commissioners, and basically because there isn't an ordinance establishing it, there aren't really rules. Like I was just going along and, you know, Chris would say, what do you want to put on the agenda? And I would give him feedback and then he would post it. But, you know, that puts it all on him. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with me initiating it and getting it to Chris in a timely fashion. To say, you know, these are the things that we'd like on the agenda. So I take full, you know, I can own that. And whoever is chair, I think there's, you know, there's not a problem, and it'll probably even be appreciated to be a little bit more, you know, take some initiative about and with intention about what should be on the agenda. And then the note taking was important. And so that's what I wanted to say about the, you know, our charter and what I've been learning about our roles and responsibilities. And so I don't know, that's what I know about the commission, and what Marty and Chris see as their role. We've been seeing them do it, but we don't know that it's been described or at least I haven't heard it described. And so I think this would be helpful for us all to learn a little bit more and to have a little bit more intention about what we're doing within our roles and responsibilities. Does anybody else have anything they want to add, or any questions, or maybe you know something more about commissions than I do? I am pretty new to all this.
Chris and Stephanie have their hands up.
Okay.
In terms of the format for commissions, the agenda generally has a particular format. It goes first to approving the minutes and looking at public input and looking at unfinished business and old business, and then looking at new business. So that's generally the structure of most commissions that I've been involved with. In terms of what goes on under new business, in general, if two commissioners want something on a future agenda, that's how it works with the council, and that's how I've seen it work with other commissions in terms of adding things to the agenda. So that's what I know that might be helpful.
Okay, thank you, Steph.
Just a comment for the record that the Forest Lands Commission does have a charter in Ashland Municipal Code. It's chapter 2.15. Maybe wants to look it up. It may even have a date when it was founded.
1804 or something.
Something was added in 2010. 2010. Oh, it actually does reference the role and responsibility of the Forest Lands Commission were first established in February 1993, pursuant to Resolution 93-06. There's a bit of a paper trail there if you wanted to track any more of that down.
Okay. Is it long, Chris? Is there?
No, there's only 3 sections: purpose, established, membership, powers and duties generally.
Can you share that with us or summarize? Is that possible?
Yeah, it's a little too long for that, but I'd be happy to paste the link in the chat. Okay,
that'd be great. Yeah, and we could review that. And yeah, also I think that there's been some new things that, like, what is our relationship to the to our partners, Ashland Forest Resiliency? What are is our relationship to other commissions, and having liaisons with other commissions? I think those are things that are within our purview to look at, whether we want to be that involved or not. I see Marty, you have your hand up.
Yeah, just to let people know that 1992, Ron McCormick and associates developed the first forest management plan. He was out of Grants Pass. He was a former forest supervisor. And in it, he suggested the development of the Forest Lands Commission, as I recall. And then the fire chief at the time initiated that process. And that's the date that I had in my mind, was 1993. So it's a pretty good length of time.
Yeah, it sounds like it. We're antiques. Anybody else have anything on that? Okay. That's not really a decision. That's just like going over what was there. So I think we can move on. The next thing,
sorry, I have a quick,
go ahead.
Thanks for going into so much detail and looking into all that stuff. A lot of those were things that I didn't know either, or details that. So thanks for doing all that research and looking into that and reporting back to us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it felt good to me too to do that.
Thank you, Sil. I noticed, I just have to, interesting, I think you skipped one of the powers and duties, which I keep looking at, which is, it's kind of interesting, is the third one is says to develop, or maybe I just missed you saying it, to develop a strong community volunteer program to assist
that's right.
the Ashland Forest Plan. So I thought that was interesting.
That is true. And I think, I think that's a great thing that we could do more of. We know we have a great volunteer group working on trails, and we don't know the potential for volunteers. I know the Wildfire Safety Commission, after, they're doing the job that Allison Lurch and Katie Gibble, they're not doing the entire job, but they're doing a big part of the job with a group of dedicated volunteers. And so there's nothing saying that if there's things that we want to accomplish that we couldn't do that as well. Yeah, so thank you for reminding me of that.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight that because I do feel that regardless of where the responsibility lies to interface with, and when I'm thinking of trail groups like AWTA and RVMBA, I think that the city or Ashland Parks and Rec or Forest Lands Commission can and should do a better job working with those groups and having, formalized ways of working with those groups. And we've been trying to sort of make that happen, but it kind of keeps getting bogged down.
Yeah, I think there's the Ashland Parks Commission. They have people doing weed and non-native vegetation control in the parks, and even some fuels work in the park. So there's things that we can do, and I think we have a good community of with the volunteer spirit. And again, it's hard during COVID, but we have had more field trips, and I know that that's a part of field trips and being able to talk to people in person, out on the ground, is my favorite part of this commission work.
Yeah, that's a good segue. I've been meaning to ask, are we allowed to conduct outside field trips, or are those still not allowed with COVID? It'd be great to start bring back those and start doing that again if we're able to.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. Do Steph or Chris, do you know?
I think as long as we're following the state COVID guidelines, that we would be okay. I don't, being out there isn't necessarily the trick. It's getting people to that place. But I guess you could just start a field trip at one place where people can access it via their private vehicles, as long as we don't, have to go up gated roads or anything like that.
Right. Okay, well, that's good to know. Anything else on that subject before we move on to Frank's got something he wants to say.
Yeah, I'm kind of nervous about hosting a super spreader event, even if it's outside. Omicron's going nuts, excuse me, and just the idea of even if it's outside, I wouldn't go. I'm in the group of death, so vaccinated and over 60. So I don't know what the attendance is going to look like. The young, healthy guys, I'm sure you'll survive.
Well, we can, when the time comes and when we're inspired to start those up again, we can get that on an agenda for new business, and then we'll see where we're at with the virus and the pandemic at that point in time.
Follow up.
Obviously not going to do it this month.
So, just a quick follow-up question, because I've never been a part of Forest Lands Commission when COVID wasn't happening. I was always under the impression these field trips were small learning experiences for Forest Lands Commission members. Is that right? What Frank made me just think that it was like open to the community, and okay, it is open to the community. Interesting. Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, we've had, sometimes we've had some pretty good turnout, and yeah, and I had a group of Malaysian foresters here once.
Wow, cool.
You know, that were interested in what we were doing.
So we were doing legit community outreach. I did not realize when people were talking about field trips that that's what they were. Oh, fantastic. Okay.
Yeah. So before COVID, we had a retired Forest Service entomologist, Bill Shop, who's a local Ashland retired guy. He's so amazing, really good teacher. So we brought him out, and it was open to the public. Advertised on Nextdoor, and we got only 8 people came out, but there were maybe 4 commissioners, 8 people. And then Bill Shop doing just like a great talk about bark beetles. We got to pull bark off of trees and see different bark beetles and look at a recent die-off event in the pines that are right behind the park building. So it was super, and it was like kickoff time. We spent maybe a year talking about how we were going to do it, had them on the schedule, backup dates, backup commissioners. There was going to be a botany one, and then COVID happened.
Yeah. Yeah, we've had, when the Wonder Trail opened up, we had we took a bus load of people off the top, and then we walked down the Wander Trail all together and looking at the different fuel treatments. And we had a Nature Conservancy there talking, you know, with their cookie, showing, you know, fire intervals. And yeah, it's great. And then of course, when I did my art on fire, the city and the Forest Service stepped up and took field trips with my class up and provided some great artistic inspiration that we have not yet been able to exhibit, but when the pandemic's over, we are gonna put up that art exhibit in the fire department. So that'll be pretty cool too. Marty.
Yeah, I want to lend support to this idea of field tours. This group, I'm looking around at who's here. Frank's been here a long time, but the city and the Forest Lands Commission has sponsored, I'm guessing, in my experience, 30, 40 tours, 50 over the years, particularly in the pre-AFR years, and attendance varied quite a bit. Forest Lands Commission was involved quite a bit, and it was really, really very effective on building support for the work that the city has done. And it was a constant sort of effort. So I think it's just really useful for the city, for the Forest Lands Commission to move that way. We've got a great resource there.
Yeah.
Really easily accessible.
Yeah, so I think all of this is a really good segue into Frank's topic, that all this takes time, and how much time are we willing to commit? So, Frank.
Hey, I just had may I just do a really, I'm so sorry,
Sure.
really quick go back?
Yeah.
This kind of started, Leslie was asking about the volunteer, like part of our mission, right, is to, it's hard to interpret what that means. Like, are we supposed to recruit volunteers to be like volunteer rangers up in the forest lands? I've often wondered about that too. So we kind of got onto the tours, but we didn't really get to answer, I think, Leslie's question. I'm not sure.
It says to develop volunteer programs. So to me, that implies that it's up to us to develop what that means.
But like a field trip isn't
a different interpretation.
A field trip isn't really a volunteer program, unless
right.
you're saying, okay.
You're right, so if we wanted to develop a volunteer program, we would initiate it and see what that takes and what we would want to look at, what we would want it to look like, and what it is we want volunteers to work on.
Yeah, and I
Leslie's point is to, you know, not ignore the volunteers that are already out there doing work in the watershed.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah,
John Owen.
I'd just like to add, we probably could look at what Lomakatsi is doing with volunteer programs and take a leaf from their book, because they seem to be very successful at that, not only with the AFR, but also with the tribes and et cetera. So I think that, you know, there's a lot we can learn from that to implement further and grow.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm kind of excited. Like I said, you know, this is kind of, it's a new year, looking at, you know, the possibilities of what this commission can do. And so it's sort of enervating to me to be having these ideas and seeing that there's some excitement behind it. And Frank is now going to talk about time.
Yeah, a little bit. According to my notes, the commission is on a timeline to finish the plan amendment for climate change by the April meeting. And that means out to the public, fully done. And if you work backwards from that, that would mean we would have to have a draft for internal city review by the middle of March, which is like 60 days from right now. My rough estimates, looking at the time people are putting in on this project, is collectively as a commission, we're putting in about 50 hours a month, give or take. 14 of those hours are the monthly meetings, which leaves us 36 hours a month to work on this plan amendment, which we need a draft of in 60 days. And we still haven't even looked at some of our outlines. Alan Greenspan used to be the chairman of the Fed, and he talked about irrational exuberance in the stock market. We seem to have some irrational exuberance on this plan amendment. And what I'd like to find out from the commission is that how are we going to get this done by April? I'm just not seeing it. So who's got some suggestions on this?
I have just a comment, and I've probably made this comment before, and it is that I feel that there are experts, professionals that have many, many more hours than we do, and that this may be a type of reinventing the wheel. It just seems to me that a perfectly good climate adaptation plan may exist in our region that we could adopt and that would serve the purpose that we're looking for. So I still wonder whether it's necessary to write our own.
Question? Yeah, I was going to hold off to ask about this until we got to the climate adaptation process discussion, but in looking over reading Marty's mortality monitoring results and and just trying to answer for my own benefit what we want to achieve with the amendment to the forest plan. And if I understand it correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, but our approach to the amendment will be, I think, to focus on how we can adapt to climate change. And so I was just looking at, for example, the distinction between Douglas fir and ponderosa, and I know that Marty talked about that in his mortality report, and I did some other reading on those, the history and the history of those resources. And of course, one of the things that stuck out to me was how the Douglas fir was a prominent species and has been managed for that by the Forest Service and the BLM. And yet here we are in a position where Douglas fir, and I think Marty talks about this, they thrive in a zone where they get 35 to 160 inches of precipitation, whereas ponderosa, they thrive in 15 to 35 inches of precipitation. And so that seemed to really reinforce this concept that maybe what we need to do if we were looking at this, how to adapt to climate change, is to manage for ponderosa. And this is just one resource, but to manage for ponderosa versus the Douglas fir, and to that end, maybe look at the stands of Douglas fir for doing select cuts, which would perhaps bring in enough revenue that it would also justify pulling out some of those dead standing trees that Marty comments on, and also would bring industry back into the picture in a way that perhaps we could reinforce their expertise and maybe actually get some rapprochement between environmentalists and industry in the city as well in that context. So anyway, that's just one thought about it. Is that a realistic way of looking at adapting to climate change and how we would address that in the amendment to the forest plan?
I think that's great, John, for when we are talking about the actual process and where we go from here. So hold on to that thought, and I hope everybody will remember it so you won't have to say that all over again. But maybe, yeah, so hold on to that, and I promise we'll get to it. But maybe a thing to think about is not so much exactly how much time is needed for this, but how much time in general are we willing to spend on commission work? Because after this forest plan amendment, we presumably have other projects, and it would be nice to know when we take on projects, if we're going to take them on, how much time are people willing to commit? Now, our applications, when we applied to be on the commission, it didn't ask us how many hours we're willing to commit to. So there is no commitment, we're volunteers. It did ask us if we were willing to attend meetings outside the regularly scheduled business meetings. I, for myself, said, yes, I'm willing to. I might have even put, a time on it. And I don't know how everybody else answered, but I think it would be good to, instead of getting too hung up on what it takes to do the forest plan amendment, because that's important to know going forward when we're trying to decide where to go from here. But in general, I'd like to just go around and ask everybody, how much time you're willing to spend. And so before I do that, it looks like both Steph and Luke have their hands up.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up with what both Frank and Leslie said. Frank, I agree with you. I think that deadline, I don't think we'll make that deadline. It seems like it's fast approaching. And then Leslie, I really like your idea of finding another like regional, maybe some of the other stuff that's going on here that we could either co-opt parts of or see if we can avoid having to, rewrite everything. I like that. I like short and sweet and simple. If that gets us where we need to go quicker, because it seems like we could really get bogged down and be here a year from now still having the same meeting and talking about the same topics. So just wanted to mention those two things before we move on to the next bit. Thanks.
Okay. Steph, do you still have your hand up, or was
yes, I just wanted to maybe provide a little clarification. Most master plans have been developed by consultants. The forest plan it was unique in that it was developed by staff and by members of the Forest Lands Commission with some consultation. I don't really understand where who decided that you needed an amendment. Generally speaking, you could make recommendations for or updates. I don't know of any other commissions that have decided to make an amendment to a master plan without it going through a process with the council.
I don't know that we made a conscious decision to do that either. At least we didn't do one that we voted on. So we have no record of any decision to do it. And that's another issue. But for right now, and I think that's also good feedback for when we get to where do we go from here.
Can I make a comment?
I do want to get to that conversation, but go ahead, Chris.
Thank you. Sorry, you guys, you can't see raised hands, so
yeah,
my hand. I actually have to take exception to that because the commission did thoughtfully choose to go down this path. Yes, it was an issue that was brought to the commission by Marty and I, and I'll take responsibility for framing it up. But there was a conscious vote on which process to pursue to do an amendment to the Ashland Forest Plan. That did happen in a commission meeting. And I just, for your edification, Steph, the Ashland Forest Plan was very brief in the 2016 version in addressing the effects of climate change on the city's forests. It wasn't meant to lay out a framework for making decisions for project-based implementation in relation to climate change. And I kind of, either because we didn't have enough information at the time, or we just kind of punted it down the road to say, well, we don't know enough about what climate change is doing to city lands to make a wholesale change in our direction as we were making the rewrite to the forest plan. But in the last 5 years, the changes on the landscape have been absolutely, in some cases, staggering and at least stark. And Marty can describe and has described those, and I've done that on a couple of occasions as to some examples of what that is. And one of the biggest reasons that we need this amendment is we don't have the plan in place to do things in response to climate change, and especially not to be proactive in adapting to climate change. We did not build those into the original Ashland Forest Plan rewrite. And so that's why we came back to ask the commission, would you help us craft this amendment to the forest plan and analyze where changes need to be made in our management strategy, which is exactly what we've done. And you guys have done an amazing job at it. And I think you deserve way more credit than you're giving yourselves for how far we've come in this process. And we're actually to a point where you have learned an amazing amount about what the climate change impacts are, whether you realize it or not. You're becoming experts in this field by going through this process. Although as frustrating as it is on the process standpoint, on the content side, you've made giant leaps and bounds in gaining knowledge about climate change and working through it. And there's really no ideal framework to do this from. There's no other community like ours that has done this for a small scale community type forest. So there's unfortunately, looking to another climate plan isn't gonna help us. We have our own unique situation in our own backyard. It's a very unique setting compared to other small community forests, of which there aren't even that many to speak of. So we are kind of challenged, and we don't have another plan that we can just plug in and say, let's do what they did. And we have to, as Ashland often does, invent and innovate our way through a very challenging situation. And this commission has done it before. And if the time commitment piece of it isn't what the commission has engaged with in the past, I think that is totally fine. Give yourselves the grace that, this is a really awkward time to be working on this. Everybody's very stressed by external events. We have to meet on Zoom, for God's sake. It's really a god-awful way to go about an important piece of planning for the city. But you've accomplished, I think, way more than you think you have. And we're a lot closer to the end of this than most of you realize. And we'll get to that process point at the end for the next step. But I think you should be congratulating yourselves as to what you've been done so far, and in a really uncertain, super difficult topic. I professionally, and I want Marty to chime in on this too, but professionally, I just can't think of a more perplexing set of conditions than we're experiencing right now. The Ashland watershed in and of itself is so difficult to work in, and diversity and challenges. But throwing climate change on top of all that is just, it's like, wow, unbelievable. So you're really engaging in the far cutting edge of forest management. And it is super challenging. And so things aren't coming easy. So I just want to say it out loud that, yeah, it's hard. It's hard for all of us right now, trying to figure out what to do in this situation. And there aren't clear arrows pointing us where to go. And that makes it really difficult. But Marty, I'm going to ask you to chime in and just your observations, because I think you all need to hear from Marty what he has experienced working with the individual groups and talking to individuals from his perspective, because I think it's a lot different than what I hear people saying to the group.
Can we wait and get this time commitment subject out of the way? And then I really, I think this is a really rich discussion, and I don't want to take it away from Frank's point about the time commitment. So Frank, or is Stephanie, is your hand up?
It's still, I see, Luke, excuse me, Nate's got a hand up.
Yeah, I guess I can't remember exactly. Did we end up voting on this April timeline thing?
No, I don't think anybody ever asked for a vote on that. I said I was comfortable with whatever timeline it works out in. And I think that was just, it might have been a vote. I can't remember. I think maybe Frank brought that he would know best, but I don't feel there's a pressing timeline.
I guess my question is just like, if we're locked into that, like I would absolutely make a motion to push that later. If we're not locked into any of that, like I understand the frustration of hear it, but there's also like, it is getting more refined as we go through this process, and the discussion is really important, I think, for Chris and Marty. And so, thinking that we're going to be done in April, I think is a dream, and we're not going to get it. But I think there's still a lot of value to the work. And as far as like how much time people were willing to put in, and whether or not we take this off of our plate, if that's what the discussion is really about, we could talk about that. However, I would discourage that. But it, like Chris is saying, we're getting closer than we maybe think and realize we are, because it's just getting more and more refined. And I think there's going to be some really good discussion once it does get refined on the things we really want to focus on. And so I would just say, it seems like it's going to take what like it's in the process. If anyone has a specific concern and wants to like ditch things off our plate, because I know that was brought up last month, like we could talk about that, but other than that, like time commitment, if we're committed to the April, let's push that out, because I think we just need to kind of keep getting through these last few chapters of and see what we end up with. If we hate it, we can pass or do whatever. But I think it's going to have value, and everyone's going to notice that, whether or not you got ditched on a really crappy chapter that doesn't fit the mold of this particular exercise. I would just say, if we're committed to the April, let's push it. Other than that, good point for everyone to bring this up, but yeah, that's all I have to say.
Looks like John Williams has his hand up.
I thought I'd finally chime in really quickly. I obviously we can't make an April deadline. Like Luke was suggesting we could, or actually like Nate was suggesting we could just push our timeline out. And if we need to change it, we need to change it. No big deal. Like Chris said, it's a very tumultuous time. I think as long as Chris Chambers and Steph think we are doing something useful for the council and following the council's or whatever guidelines we need to follow to communicate that with them. This is really important information and we need to communicate it and get it down on paper. So I think we should just keep plowing ahead. That's it.
Okay, Steph?
My point was not that we shouldn't be making recommendations or updates. It was more from the vantage point of looking at budget. If we're talking about reproducing material, I don't know if you remember this, Chris, but I think we had some budget for that before. I don't know what budget we have now. And what I think is important is that we are able to make recommendations and updates to the council regarding climate change and maybe different priorities for budget even, based on the experiences that we've all been talking about. Whether it's called an amendment or whether it's initially just getting information before the next budget cycle, I think that's an important thing to think about.
Okay, so this is great because we're getting a lot of stuff out for our next, not our next, but agenda items down the line. So we're making progress in that direction. Frank, do you want to say anything more about time?
Well, I'm not against doing the project. I'd just like to have a realistic schedule. And what do we want to have as a finished product? Are we talking about just an outline, or are we talking about a full narrative, all the photos, the maps, the GIS, the monitoring discussion? We still haven't talked about social. Right now we have some outlines. So I don't see us getting done until next year. And if I'm wrong, tell me how we're going to do this. Who's going to do, when we did the forest plan, for example, we were putting in as a commission roughly 20 hours a week with 4 and 5 commissioners showing up for 2 meetings a week outside of what we're doing here. That's the kind of level of commitment we're going to need to put in to get this done. And that took 1.5 to 2 years. So let's be realistic. If we want to do the project, that's great. But it's gonna take that level of commitment, meaning more than 2 hours a month at these meetings, probably some Zoom meetings, and probably putting in 5 to 10 hours a week on this stuff at times when we hit the crunch. Do we want to do that? That's the real question.
Okay, well, I think then what I'm hearing is people are still wanting to talk about this process and where it's going. And we really can't put a timeline on it because we don't know where it's going. And so maybe we ought to just get into that discussion. I'll just say for myself, I can't pat ourselves on the back for how far we've come, because I personally don't see where my comments have been incorporated into any of the presentations that have been done so far. So I don't think that my vote counts any more, or my comments count any more than anybody else's, but I don't think they count any less. And I'm just not seeing where my input is being considered, and I'm not given I don't feel like I've been, I'm getting an answer of, well, yeah, this is where you're wrong. I guess I need to be open to that, but I really don't feel like my input has been considered, so I can't recommend us going forward, because that's just me. So, but again, my vote doesn't count more than anybody else's, but that's my take. And there's lots of reasons why, which you've all heard, that I've talked about either in the meetings or offline or individually in emails. And so I see John Owen wants to say something.
Yeah, I get the sense, you know, in terms of the way I would look at an amendment would be that the structure of the change that just says, in accordance with this amendment, as we address adaptation to climate change, this is sort of the sequence we would go through to define what we can do under this amendment, under the forest plan. And then the specific project proposals that would come out of that is where we would get into all the detail that Frank is mentioning to justify and lay out the projects that we're proposing to the city council. And that would be the place where all of that resource information and all that knowledge would come to bear. And that's where the members of the commission would put in those hours, I would think, of hammering that out to present to the council. But the amendment itself, I would see as something, maybe we're trying to make it too encompassing. Maybe the amendment itself is just that outline that says, when you have this situation and we're facing climate change that we need to adapt to, and how do we adapt, and how do we build resilience to this change that's coming, and keep it in terms of the forest plan as this is the process for bringing forward. And maybe it's identifying those resources that lend themselves to that analysis, or lend themselves to that interpretation of being something that's affected by climate change more than other things, and therefore need to be addressed. And
yeah, I think, John, what you're talking about is at the plan level, that it's very broad. And I think our existing plan talks about adaptive management and resilience, and we know we want that. And there's always research coming in. And what I see this group doing is getting involved in project level discussions and planning. And really that's, to the point of silvicultural prescriptions and all that's at the project level, not the forest plan.
Right.
And I, that's been my input since we started. So I'm in full agreement with you, John, but.
Frank is waving his hand around.
Yep, I'm in total disagreement. We need a GIS package that's up to date. We need an inventory that's up to date. We can't wait for the project level, because the project level, you're looking at the whole package and figuring out what areas to go and work in. And we're not, what you're proposing is that we don't do that. If we want to short circuit this, a way to do it would be to go back to the existing inventory and map package and update everything. And then we can just use that. That would be the easiest way to do it. It's already in the can.
And we don't need a forest plan amendment in order to do that.
But we're not doing it right now. That's the problem.
Right, but we don't need a forest plan to do it.
Say again?
We don't need a forest plan in order to do that.
I would agree. As a matter of fact, I've mentioned this briefly to Chris. I don't know what everybody else thinks. Our first project was Restoration 2. It was the first time we had a planned timber harvest as part of forest management activities. In the past, the strategy had sort of been the trees died, so we logged them, and it kept happening over and over again. So we ended up doing a project, and it was touchy and it was sensitive, but it had community support eventually. But that's 19 years ago. If we're looking for a project to look at, why don't we go look at Restoration 2? It's already mapped. The units are all there. They were lightly thinned. And where's Luke? Luke, they only used helicopters. We helicopter logged units with road access. You think you could figure out a way we could fly some wood out of there with a cable system so we wouldn't have to use a helicopter all the time and save money? That would be the kind of a plan, a project approach maybe we should look at.
And that could be a recommendation coming from the commission.
I think it'd be easy to do just because most of the data is in the can. Oh yeah, one other thing, because of the social situation, there was concerns that we were going to clear cut city lands. I mean, there was protest in the plaza and there was like no clear cut signs and strict diameter limits. We thinned the thing rather lightly. We probably could have taken more trees out of there, but because it was so touchy, it was a light entry. So there may be opportunity to go back in, and with current conditions and needing wider spacing and different species distributions in the stands, it might be worth a revisit. So
Frank, I just want to clarify that I understand what sounds like a potential direction to go would be, instead of writing a forest plan amendment, we could update some of our data, the GIS that's available within the existing forest plan, and then focus on project level proposals. Is that what you're saying? Just to be sure that I...
Number one, it gives us something that's more specific to focus on as opposed to this more nebulous conceptual plan. We're looking at actual units with actual board feet, actual trees on them, all that kind of stuff. But by doing the project, we can come up with places where, oh, look, this part of the forest plan needs to be beefed up because we didn't think about that before. So by doing the project, we'll point out the places that need more work. That's the suggestion.
Luke has his hand up. Oh, sorry.
No, Frank, what you just said at that last moment really struck home, because I'm deep in the veg chapter and everyone else will be there eventually once like we get to a point where then it's really palatable and we can actually have the discussion around some of the items that are the change items that are. The cool thing about it is I think they play off each other so well, because the discussions and the rationale behind why we're saying this is a change item, and whether or not this gets published into the forest plan or not, we're going to have this really, really good, basically evidence of here's our rationale behind why we need to do a little bit more heavy-handed thinning project, Restoration 3 or whatnot. So I love this idea. And this, again, it strikes me a little bit on like that salvage thing that I've talked about a few times now, which I think is, not, if we get even more mortality event, but when we get more mortality event, it's like, I'd love to have some pre-planning in place for that. And whether or not that's included or a little bit too abstract and not quite implementable enough, that would be a little bit of a sidebar, but a Restoration 3 and some implementable projects, again, are going to be supported by these bullet points and tables that are saying, this is what we're seeing, this is what we've been doing, this is what we think we need to do, here's our justification of why we need to take more board feet out of these particular units. Let's have a discussion, Ashland, about that. And maybe Ashland's ready to have that. If there's a lot of flack, then I just feel like we can continue to educate the council and the population on it. It's just going to be that much easier to get the work done for Marty and Chris. And so I love it. Go ahead. Yeah, Frank, thank you.
The beauty of that is we have the monitoring data now from 19 years ago, and those units were remeasured around 2010. So we've got one pre-management measurement for these areas. The treatment gets done. We have post-management monitoring, and now we're going back and looking again. So defending it is not going to be tough because we're working off real field data. That's not going to be an issue.
Right, and we already have it laid out in these blips that we're getting put together.
Still, I've had a hand up for a long time trying to be patient. Is there a way that you can switch your view so you can see people's hands up?
Okay, go ahead, Chris. Yeah, go ahead and pipe up.
Okay. I want to make some space for Marty to chime in on this because he's been with the commission and the shepherd of this process from 1995 until the present time, and has worked with Frank and John and many folks through the Restoration 2 and 3 projects. There was a Restoration 3, which is the Windburn parcel project. So, and I would say we should probably ditch the word restoration, which is the only point I will make right now in ceding my time to Marty is one of the things we did not cover in the forest plan is really anything beyond a restorative approach, which I believe with climate change is now inappropriate to even use that word, that we're restoring the forest. Restoring it to what? We're restoring it to an uncertain future that we don't know exactly what's going to happen. So that word doesn't even really apply anymore, unless we're maybe could fudge it by say restoring resilience to the forest, but even that's kind of questionable. So I think that fundamentally is we don't have the cover, we don't have the strategic plan in place to even start talking about project level work. I think that's just it's a backwards way to talk about forest planning. Even to the federal level, the feds will make a forest plan and then projects come out of that forest plan. So what Marty and I are saying is we can't go into project level stuff because our forest plan is not covering what we need to do, what we think we need to do out in the forest. And even that is up for debate, and that's why we're here. So anyway, I'm not gonna go any further. I wanna have Marty spend a little bit of time with some observations because I think it would really help the group and the process.
Well, I really like this discussion. I really give the Forest Lands Commission a lot of credit for having this kind of discussion. And that, honestly, where we're at right now was hopefully intentional, that we, through our processes, we would arrive here and have these kind of discussions. The original task was to lay out as much as we could, as much as I could decipher in as good a way as I could, what's happening with climate change? What's the research saying? And look back 25 years at our data and try to project forward 25 years. So that was the task. And decided to do it in PowerPoint because we'd had some experience with that and it seemed to work pretty well for the commission. So there's kind of the marching orders. In the process, I thought Sil came up with a really nice idea to split the responsibilities into 3 groups with 2 chapters each, because it's a tremendous amount of work in an uncertain field right now. So it is asking a lot of the Forest Lands Commission, and I just have such a high regard for people who will come out and volunteer and do this work. That being said, there's nothing much worse than feeling like you're not heard. That doesn't work. That's never worked in the city lands, in the Forest Lands Commission. And in fact, just the opposite from the very inception. This group has done work where there was mutual respect and from the very beginning. I remember Keith Woodley having a conversation with me about that. And it's unique to Ashland. Somebody mentioned it. This process we have is relatively unique. It fits a complex watershed. It fits, in this case, a lot of uncertainty in this topic, and it fits the social environment that we work in. So specifically this process that we've been in, last night I sat down with Nate to go over the veg chapter. And I've experienced it a lot of times with the Forest Lands Commission, and I certainly have experienced it here. I was just impressed with how much that he had grasped and put out there. And that was on top of all the work that Luke had done. And Luke was really quite good. So that in all the work that he had done to try to assimilate comments and in kind of a tenuous operating space. Okay, so the intent here was to go to each group and compare the stuff that had been prepared, that I'd prepared as part of the process, tried to elaborate so that the commissioners could understand where we're at in that situation, and then throw as many darts as, I don't care, boy, whatever anybody sees that they're uncomfortable with. It doesn't matter whether it's process, content, this is the opportunity to be taken now. And it, you know, not without mistakes made and errors. We've had that all along through the years with the Forest Lands Commission, but Forest Lands Commission has always eventually risen to say, okay. And I look back in the record and it's about every 5 years, give or take a year, where a major project comes up and the Forest Lands Commission tackles it. And I've just grown to have a lot of faith in that process. But key to that process is that somewhere along the line, when there's somebody doesn't feel like their stuff is being heard, there's got to be an avenue. And in this process, now's the time. And so it's sitting down with Nate, well, first Luke, I mean, good God, challenging piece of work, but just, and then I reflected also on Frank and John, and such good work. They had an advantage of having been through this process before. So Frank had some great ideas, and we kind of compared and mixed and came up with a proposal. John has a lot of insight. So I don't know. I see in the process last night, Nate, for me, kind of hit the nail on the head. He proposed coming up, and I shouldn't take Nate's words out of his mouth or anything, but he was suggesting bullets. Let's consolidate the vegetation chapter down to bullets with an appendix of information if it's needed. If the Forest Lands Commission can live with just bullets and that suffices, hey, that's great. That's why I feel like going through this process, if we end up with just bullets and that works for the Forest Lands Commission, great, fantastic. If you want to do more, elaborate, good. But to date, I've really felt good about the process that you guys have developed, and also doing the hard work, the commitment to it. And I sat down with Sil, and Sil, I just have to say that, I mean, the work you did with the charter and roles and responsibilities, and I mean, Sil does a great job. everybody on this commission. I haven't been able to sit down with Leslie, but or John, or Steph. I mean, Steph's great to have as our liaison. So if there's issues, then if we go through this process, when I've sat down with both groups that I've sat down with, either collectively or with Nate and Luke individually, that I've been impressed at how far we've come in arriving at good positions. So I feel pretty optimistic, but I have to be careful. I tend to be that way. And I don't want to overstate it. I certainly don't want to overstate it, but I don't want to understate it either. I kind of agree with Chris that we're doing some hard work, but we're kind of in uncharted territories. And so if there's things that are uncomfortable, now's the time. So I really appreciate this conversation and Sil's kind of guiding it and everybody participating. Boy, that's the history. And I look around this group and I say, you bet, this group can do it. So no specifics, but just process related. I'm pretty encouraged by your work.
I've got a comment, Marty, just specifically to what you said. I think both Priscilla and I have felt like our input has not been listened to. You just complimented Priscilla on her looking at the charter, but she's had many content, a lot of content feedback that has been sort of just brushed aside. I've mentioned many times some of my issues with the persist change language. At one point, it seemed like folks were taking that in, but then it got forgotten. You mentioned that it doesn't feel good to not be heard. Well, I realize that the two women that have been working really hard on this have continually been giving feedback and been feeling as though we have not been heard. So I'm throwing that out there because I think it's important. And I understand that there are 3 men who have been on this group for a very long time, and that I am the most junior member. But I also, I teach at SOU. I have some level of expertise. I'm an intelligent person. And I want to say that I feel as though I am being dismissed and people are being dismissive towards me or telling me that my opinion is wrong or that my idea is wrong. So that needs to change. The power dynamic that I feel is real. It's my experience. And so it's that I'm going to say that's my experience so far in this group. And I would like to, I just want to put that out there and say that needs to change. I absolutely respect senior members of this commission's experience. I absolutely respect your skill, your expertise, your knowledge, but I'm not here to be brushed off. And that's the way that it seems to me. I feel like I'm just here to kind of say, okay. And that's not the way I want to feel as a commission member. So that's my comment.
Yeah, can I respond? Or maybe John, you go ahead first. Go ahead, John.
Well, I was just going to say that, like you, Leslie, I'm probably the most junior member. And so it would really help me to know, have a little more specifics from you and from Sil about what you feel you haven't been heard on. What comment, what issues, because I'm just trying to sort it all out and understand as we go and being new at it. So it really would help me to know more in detail what the two of you feel you haven't been listened to regarding that.
Okay, and I want to add to John's comment. I think that's really important. And thank you, Leslie, for making that comment. it has never been the intent of me or the Forest Lands Commission to discount anybody. And in fact, one of the things I feel the best about over the years, and we've had some great professionals over a long, long time, but one of the things that has really stood out is that we've had people that weren't professionals that were honored, valued, and heard, and gave us that more complete feeling. Now,
I am an environmental professional. I have a master's degree in environmental science.
I'm not saying that. I wasn't referring to you, Leslie. I really wasn't. Now, the way that the process is set up was there wasn't an intent to do a lot of work until we got to this point with each group. And your group, for me, is really important because there is more there. I really appreciate myself. I really appreciate information that isn't running with the flow, because that's where we make our improvements. And so the degree to which you and or Sil, whatever it is, if it wasn't heard, I tend to believe it was because we had a process that got us to this point with the 2 chapters, and then we've got a background now in climate change. We've hashed it out some, and now and maybe it's a problem with the process. I apologize if that's the case, but boy, I mean, I would love to sit down and hear what the things that you and Sil, I mean, so you got, so that we could compare the notes, bring it back to the commission, they could respond to it. Of course, you're a great professional. We're fortunate to have people like you. Sil is a great professional. So
yeah. Awesome. So may I just talk a little bit more specific, and I hope this isn't discounting, but I think the reason, some of the comments for me that I kind of dismissed from both of you, which I've said a couple of times now, it was the persist change difficulty specific to your chapter. And I truly believe that you guys took the chapter that makes no sense for the persist change model. And if something filtered through there that was like, well, we maybe need to be ahead of, population density due to people leaving drier areas coming up here, and that's going to change recreation. Like, okay, maybe there's a content there, maybe there's this much, but you guys didn't have much of the work. And so I would just encourage you, if you're still really like annoyed and frustrated, just look, the next person who sends their consolidated chapter, look at that chapter and just take it for what it is. Know that the persist change, as clunky as that is, it did filter out to whatever these changes are. There's the content, and I would just say I am excited to hear everyone's take and disagreements on the discussion items from those other chapters. So like, if you feel like you're spinning your wheels and not being heard, get out of your recreation chapter, because it sucks for this particular process.
My problems with the persist change dichotomy have nothing to do with the wildlife or recreation chapters. And I've stated over and over again that I don't think it's a useful category for, as a politician, as someone who's worked on Capitol Hill, when I look at that, it is not meaningful to me in terms, and my concern is that this is meaningful to the people in city council. And when I read it, it doesn't. So it's not related to the chapters. Sil and I wrote our chapters in a completely different way and have, a very different idea of what this amendment, if we wrote it, would even look like. Mm-hmm. But, we've been sort of, I guess we're going in this direction, but I know that neither Sil nor I necessarily feel very confident in the direction and structure that the plan is in now. I really just wanted to kind of get that out there as opposed to necessarily delving into specifics, but thanks, Luke. I mean, thanks. Just keep looking at the name tag. I know you're Nate. Thank you for your comments.
Yeah, I could, yeah, I mean, I've said it a million times, the persist change language, it needs to be, if you're going to use it, it needs to be clarified with whether you're talking about, are you persisting or changing with the forest plan, which we're supposedly amending? Are you persisting and changing with Marty's new recommendations that have come from his research? Or are we talking about persisting and changing of the ecosystem? And the answer I keep getting is that, oh, the persist change language comes from the climate smart documentation that Charisse shared with us. And I took what Charisse shared with us and I sent it to the commission, pointing out those differences. And we have Charisse sitting in on every single one of our meetings. And I'd be curious to see what Charisse thought that was. So the persist and change, you know, I could be wrong on that, but, you know, I'm not really hearing a good reason why the same words are used for three entirely different concepts. And so I could also say, I've talked about going about this using the NEPA as a model. And I get, well, we're not doing NEPA, but I've done a lot of planning, both NEPA and otherwise, and it is a good model. And it usually involved scoping, where you talk to the public and you look to see what the partners are doing. It's also called gathering givens, and you look to see what the partners are doing and you're talking about what they think. I've talked about getting involved with the Forest Service. We share this watershed with the Forest Service, and we have not had their input that I know of. Maybe it's there, maybe not, but they haven't been in on these meetings, and I haven't seen where their input has been included. So I've talked about that. I don't think a plan amendment is needed because I think adaptive management allows you to do what you want to do. I've asked both Chris and Marty if what's in the forest plan does not allow them to do what they think is needed. And I've heard, no, maybe I'm hearing that wrong, but I've heard that the plan does allow to do these things, but maybe I've heard wrong. But if I'm going by what I've heard, that it does allow it, then I really don't understand why we need to amend the plan in order to do what we want to do. I'd rather just get to work to do the work that we want to do. I've asked from the very beginning for a document sharing platform so that we're not trading documents over email and getting lost on which are, you know, which is the latest draft. So those are a few of my comments that have not been incorporated. And I think, you know, I don't know that I'm right, and I may not be, but I do feel that it's been dismissed and not taken. So there's evidence, if you will. Frank's got a comment.
Yeah, for the record, I don't support the persistent change either. I never liked it. I think it's too much of an abstract concept. What we need to focus on is plants are growing, plants are dying, animals are romping and frolicking in the woods, snow and rain fall, fires burn. What's happening out on the ground? That's our focus. The persistent change, I'm not sure it adds very much.
I'd also be curious if of any of the other commissioners, as we've been going through these chapters, particularly the veg, we've gone through the chapters many times. Are other of you recognizing the comments that you've made in the subsequent versions? And I'd love to know it. If anybody, maybe, I don't know who's feeling heard. Does anybody recognize their comments being incorporated into subsequent versions?
I think Luke and Nate have been doing a great job of trying to put in people's discussions and what we talked about during the meetings into the veg chapter. I definitely want to put that out there. And I also want to mention that Chris is waving his hands around wildly. Okay. I'm taking on the responsibility. I'm going to call on people. Okay.
Thank
is
you.
that all right
Please
with everybody?
Please do, because I can't see it.
Chris.
Okay, my unmute button is not behaving. Thank you. I want to be very, very clear that, and I have said this multiple times, I've said it to you, Sil, in person, and I've said it in meetings, that we cannot do the work that we see out there that is needed without an amendment to the forest plan. I would patently refuse to move forward with any project work that I believe is in conflict with what the city council has authorized us to do. Because there's, trust me, going into these processes is onerous, and it takes a lot of time, and it does take it out of you. And I would not want to have to drag everybody through this and go through this if I felt like we didn't need it. That I felt like I tried to make very clear up front. That is the entire reason that we are here. If we could go about our business under the existing Ashland Forest Plan, I would have been romping and frolicking in the woods with all the animals that Frank described, because I would have felt like, yeah, let's go adapt to climate change and do the things that are really difficult and unknown and uncertain, and let's just have at it. And in all my experience, that we are in a situation where we are in a high degree of uncertainty. We do not have firm footing in the Ashland Forest Plan. So I disagree with Frank's analysis. I'm sorry to say, Frank, and still I feel like I have stated it over and over. We are not on firm footing. We need to reestablish our strategic direction in order to engage in project level work.
Okay, thank you. I heard wrong. I stand corrected.
Stephanie.
Yes, I have been with this group for a long time now, first as a commissioner actually, and then as liaison. My concern about this is that the council really doesn't know that there is an amendment that was proposed. I think that it's important to let the council know that climate change has changed the forest plan to the extent that we need to look at what's realistic in the whole plan. I don't think it's a revision that you're talking about. Maybe you're talking about looking at what 5 years of data from what we have has actually done, and what that change means in terms of what we need to look at in terms of changing for the future. But at this point, I think what's hard is that I don't think money has been allotted for this. I don't think that money has been allotted for any printing part of this. Generally speaking, it's staff that carries out projects like this, not a commission. That's asking a lot of a commission to do this kind of work. I think that it isn't that I don't think it's valuable. I think it's tremendously valuable. I just think that you need to be able to tell the council what the boots on the ground kind of stuff is, and why that's important in the budget process, because that's the reality of some of this, is what staff time should be devoted to this, what consultant time should be devoted to this, and having some agreement about that before you find that you've developed something that that can't be implemented because of those reasons.
I think John was waiting, and then Chris. John, you're muted. I'm not sure if you're passing along.
I'm just saying, let Chris, you go ahead and then I'll chime in after you.
I just want to make sure, Steph, that for the record, you understand that I believe wholeheartedly we have engaged in a process in alignment with what council's vision would be for this to unfold. One, Priscilla in her report, council did talk and inform council about the process that we were undergoing. So council has indeed heard about our work to do a climate adaptation. I think we've been saying amendment. I think addendum was the word that we originally went with to the Ashland Forest Plan, which was approved by council. We are to date, as far as the budget goes, we have invested Marty's time, which I have been tracking, and we are well within our budget for consulting. If we have printing costs, we can cover those. That's a very small fraction of what any costs would be in the future. And we really have to see where we fall out in project planning, and the time isn't yet upon us to figure out how we would implement potential projects that come out of this effort. But with the experience that we have, Marty has been budgeting and doing work for private landowners and his clients for, I won't even venture a guess at how many years, many decades, and including with the city, with the AFR project. And so I have a pretty good sense of costs. So I'm not raising any alarm bells about exceeding budgets yet. We will have time to talk about that when we get down to thinking about implementation. But we certainly don't want to be in a position of losing any money. And we've made it a point in the past to say that we are always doing the right thing by the land first and worrying about our costs simultaneously, but not letting that guide our planning. And to say we can't do this or we can't do that because either we don't have the budget, or the opposite side of that coin is it would look like we were making money for the city off of our forest lands. So it's been a really difficult thing to split hairs. And the AFR project, as an example, had invested many millions of dollars in that project to make it go. I don't think we're in that situation, but also there are grant opportunities on the horizon to make some of this work go, like we did during the Restoration 3 implementation. We found money to backfill that. So I'm confident when the time comes, we will be getting council information about budget implications of doing the work, and that we have communicated what's happening at the commission to the council.
John, Owen?
Yeah, I just had a thought about process, and I was thinking perhaps we should look at persist as what is already incorporated under the forest plan, what is already being done, and it's the change that needs to be addressed in an addendum or amendment, and the criteria for identifying or evaluating the change and identifying what needs, how the city needs to address that change. And I guess that's what I would suggest. Maybe that would help simplify it.
Stephanie, do you still have your hand up, or you just?
The council understanding that you're working on something to talk about how climate change impacts what we're doing with the forests versus what specific things you think the council needs to address in terms of changes of where they're putting funding or changing. I'm not sure. I'm a counselor. I'm on the council. And in talking with other counselor members, I don't feel that they're understanding that what this group is wanting to do is, I'm not sure what an amendment is even. It sounds like it's changing. It sounds like what you're talking about is that you have data that shows that things are happening faster than you thought, that there's some specific data that you'd like to present to show why certain changes are needed in the master plan. It sounds like you want to change some of what the master plan is to be more in line with what's happening with climate change. And I think all of that is valid. I think that it's just important that you connect the reality of the work with the conceptual part of this.
Luke or Nate, whoever, you're muted.
I think Sil had her hand up long before me, but I'll jump in after her. And
okay, we are going to run up against the time, and so we won't be able to make a decision. I did want to add a little levity and how I felt I've been heard that makes up for all the rest, and that is Chris talking about resilience rather than restoration. And my little story is back in 2010 when I was in the Washington office, the Forest Service and most of the forest industry was using that term restoration. And this wasn't my idea, but I had heard it from a biologist that we really should be talking about resiliency. So when I was writing documents for a congressional hearing, I said exactly what you said, Chris, about restoration versus resiliency. And ever since then, the Forest Service and much of the forest industry has been using resiliency. And I'm very proud of that. And I'm bragging about it. And in that case, I definitely feel I've been heard. So there's some resiliency or some levity for you, and something that I feel pretty good about. So go ahead, Nate.
I just want to give you one more that you've been heard and say, Chris, can you respond? I remember this being brought up once and I love it and I want a shared document platform, but I wasn't sure if there was quorum issues with real-time editing and comments on like a Google Doc type situation or not, or if you can speak to that or potentially reach out to the city lawyer and just get clarification on could we do a Google Docs for shared files and editing, and if so, like, let's get that going. Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up again, Sil, because that was a brilliant idea when you had it, and we need that now.
I will ask. I know there were issues brought up at some point in the past, and I don't know where we are on that right now. So let me find the answer. I
heard. Well, I thought that Melissa told us there was no problem with that, but I don't know if that was the last or not. But yeah, it would be good to revisit that.
So it's 7:29.
Okay, so we don't really have any resolution about where we're going, except for that we know we'll be meeting again in February.
Is a month too long to meet again? I just want to put it out there that it seems like we're making some progress and we're battling through some issues. And I personally don't want to wait a month to continue this conversation.
Should we could have a study session. We just need to, notice it to the public if we're meeting as a quorum. We could do that.
I guess if I'd like to know if anyone agrees with that. I don't want to make us all meet if I'm the only one.
I could support that.
Should we just split the difference and go to 2 weeks?
I'd support that for sure.
Okay. Does that need a motion, Sil? I'm not sure.
We
Chris.
could make the motion. And yeah, make the motion.
All right.
What are we calling it? A study session?
Yeah, we can call it a study session.
Depends what you want to accomplish in that meeting. Do you want to make any decisions? Because you could call a special meeting, but if it's a study session, you can't decide anything.
So I'm okay with either one.
Well, if we have a study session, we can queue up decisions that can be made officially at the meeting in 2 weeks. So let's call it a study session to make things easier.
Good
So
comment.
that puts us at the 25th, I believe. So I'll just make a quick motion to notify of a study session at the same time, same place as usual meetings, but on the 25th of January.
That sounds good to me.
A second.
All in favor? Anybody opposed? Then sounds like we're meeting on the 25th. Next Tuesday, same time, same channel.
That's two, not next Tuesday, it's 2 Tuesdays, right?
Yeah, on the 25th.
Okay.
All righty. Good. Thank you.
Night, everyone. Have a great Tuesday, or what's left of it.
Good night.
Next time.